Good evening, everyone. I'm Lily Liu, and I'm the host of the series Let Me Interview You. Today is October the 28th, and we are doing episode 10 of this year's Let Me Interview You series. I am so honored tonight to have a very special guest, S. Orlean Grant. Trained as a nurse, but why she's so special to our reimagined community is that Orlean had lost her mother and after losing her mother has started a foundation in honor of her late mother. It is a fascinating story, and I would love to have her share it with us. So let me first greet Orlean. Hi, Orlean.
Hello, I'm honored to be here as well with all of you your outstanding audience and participants. It's just amazing.
We have a wonderful community, all generations, and all interested in the fact that after loss and grief, there can be renewal, growth, and what they call post traumatic growth. So please, why don't we, as I bring up the lovely photos that you had shared, why don't you tell us first a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, my journey, I'm a Midwesterner by background, um, and I've had a pretty eclectic career. I chose nursing, or rather, um, my father chose nursing. He was a physician in Gary, Indiana, and a surgeon. And said that, a longer journey being in nursing gave you the flexibility, gave you the ability to maneuver, try out different careers, always come back to physical nursing. But there was such a variety of areas that one could explore. I found it really attractive, and also because I had kind of a wanderlust in really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was telling Lily a little bit before, in my undergrad, the professors I really admired most were in the graduate program for psychiatric nursing and community mental health. And I was interested in community mental health because I've always been interested in systems and how the system impacts the individual and how the individual either thrives or gets overwhelmed or is not able to navigate the environment they're in. So I was always interested in how this interplay happened and what possible policies and practices could be put into place for the individual, but also for the community as a whole. Both my parents were active as civil rights workers and civic organizers, but my mother, I'm the youngest child, so I spent the most time with her. My mother was constantly in the community, creating solutions to gaps in Gary, Indiana, which is where I grew up. And one of them that I remember, my brother just sent me an updated picture of this the other day. She was really instrumental in helping to create the Campbell Friendship House. And that Friendship House was where people from the South, African Americans from the South, were moving up to go to work in the steel mills, which were, as you know, at that time in the 50s, just the major source of revenue and jobs. And barely you didn't need an education. You just need to be able to go to do that kind of labor. So there was a lot of individuals moving up from the South, a lot of professionals moving up from the South. And that was one of the first landing places for them where they could stay and then find more permanent living quarters after that. And she co-founded the Jack and Jill chapter for Gary, Indiana. She helped create the bridge clubs, symphony clubs. She was just very, very active, as well as participating in civil rights activities with my father. So I had an example of always doing something in the community, being part of the community, responsible back to the community. We were given a lot, so a lot was expected of us to take that kind of experience and then share what we had learned and what we could bring to the table. So the last 16 years of her life, my mother lived with me. And so I got to know her in a different way, seeing her more as reversal of I became her caretaker. I became the one who was um, asking her what her needs were, taking care of her medical issues, taking care of her entertainment issues, clothing, the whole nine yards, which was very unexpected because I had three older siblings and I just thought normally, you start with the oldest, but not start with the youngest. So, but I was very grateful for that because I got to know my mother in a very different way, at a very different time of her life. My father had passed by then. And one of the things she kept saying to me, I had transitioned from a kind of a community-based program, being the executive director of Delmarva Foundation, and then moving into becoming a medical homes director for the Primary Care Association in Washington, D.C. Um, I left there when President Obama was elected and started my own for-profit healthcare management consulting company. And it was good. I enjoyed it. Entrepreneurship is really great. But what I found out, it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't joyful to get up to go and, do that kind of contractual work around the Washington, D.C. area. And my mother kept saying, well, you need to do something. You need to do something for the community. You're working and whatnot, but what are you doing for the community? And then she passed not too long after that when we were having conversations of possibilities. And I started doing some things in Vienna, Virginia, where I live, and being on the commission boards here. And then when she passed, I thought one of the things I could do is take all the lessons that she had shared with me. There were lots and lots of stories she would tell me about how she grew up, how difficult it was for my father to go through put himself through medical school in the 1940s, some of the things that they had to endure, and then just watching them do the marches and the civil rights movement. I decided to create a foundation in her name and really bring it to a community-based level and bring it to a community that had obvious gaps in services. So when I was looking around where to incorporate, I chose Maryland, even though I lived in Virginia. Northern Virginia is resource rich in nonprofits. Washington, D.C. is rich in nonprofits. But I found Prince George's County, where I had done a lot of for profit work and some work with large associations, that there were just service gaps in women's health care. There were service gaps in healthcare and educational delivery to older adults. There wasn't much job development emphasis for adults who were 50 and up. Ageism was not being brought to the table. So you also saw a lot of individuals fall in what I would call the donut hole, in that they would take buyouts or leave federal work early. Buyout was too good to be true. And then they have a house mortgage, they have a car payment, and their skill set and their network is out of date. And so one of the things I wanted to do through the foundation was create a mechanism to help older adults refresh those skills and go back to work. So we did several years of boot camps, um, working with the government there. We also did workforce forum hiring events. Our last one, we had 660 older adults interview directly with 60 employers because we knew that the block was the human resource door. And then the other part that we wanted to do that we saw that was necessary, and it wasn't a pleasant subject, but it was elder abuse and fraud. And older adults, everybody gets caught up in fraud, but when it's an older adult, that's a life savings. That is your life's work that you cannot recoup. There's no 20 more, 50 more years to work on building a nest egg or paying off your house. It's done at that point. So it's devastating. So I started working with the police department, state's attorney's office, and we also worked with the Department of Justice, the Security Exchange Commission, in building a repertoire of experts. And when we did panels across Prince George's County in all 9 districts, and then also in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and in Montgomery County now. So that has spread. It has morphed from time to time, but really bringing in at this point, incorporating trauma-informed principles in that, really looking at when you're having cases of elder abuse and fraud, you're also dealing with the African American population. You're dealing with a lot of lived trauma, and you're dealing with a lot of ongoing microaggression and macroaggression. And so the reaction to abuse, the reaction to a fraud may be entirely different than what's expected. And in our dealings, we do some one-on-one work with individuals. We do get calls and referrals. And we also have, through our program, which is called the Village Connector Experience Program, which is a structure outreach call program for older adults that self-identify as socially isolated. And that's a national program that we have. We also train our ambassadors who are volunteers. They get 16 hours of training to really listen for the lived trauma in those individuals because we have vets with PTSD. We have individuals who have lost almost everyone in their family. Um, we have physical loss, and that's a grieving process in itself. And then we have people who've had really traumatic past that really come into this service. So we've been able to integrate some of those complex approaches and principles. And the way I became aware of this is during the elder abuse workshops. And we don't do PowerPoints. I have banned PowerPoints from any types of workshops we do. So we're up close and personal with individuals. I just gave one this afternoon. And basically, you're sitting there with a group of individuals, or you may be walking around and talking to individuals, and they will start telling you, this happened to me and I haven't told anybody. Or I've experienced this in my life and I never said this before. And so those stories come up when we do workshops. When we did the boot camps for the 50 plus intensive boot camps, that one thing that really, really got me, there were crushing stories of individuals who had a negative record in their head about they couldn't do this, they're not good enough to do this, they're not smart enough to do this, or too old to do this, that was perpetuated by their friends and their family. And so part of what we did was really try to rebuild their inner strength and their capacity to be resilient. And we had three instructors and we had a coordinator and myself. And they're gorgeous, and they were just fabulous teachers. We had to sit down and recalibrate how we approached it and give people enough time to talk about who they were, what their aspirations have always been, and that this was their last opportunity. Basically, because people were in their 50s, 60s, somewhere in their 70s, and they felt like if they didn't do it now, they weren't going to accomplish it. So within that 7 week period of time, there was a lot of safe space for people to talk. There was a lot of attention to the atmosphere. There was a lot of attention to how we speak to them, how we made the environment comfortable. We had not expected that. So that has been probably one of the most eye-opener things um, that I can think of. And it dovetails back to my mother in that there was a myriad of things she exposed me to, and a lot of them I didn't understand when they were going on. But what she did, and also my father did, was help prepare me to, if a situation comes to you, you can dissect it, you can formulate an approach, and you can figure out what needs to happen. And that has helped me not only in my for-profit business, but more in my nonprofit activities and being able to build programs, change programs, morph programs as the capacity for us to understand what we need to be giving back to the community.
Beautiful. Well, first, I would just like to say that you are a true credit to the Grant family name. I think you have really shared with us, and there are so many things that will resonate with the members of our community tonight because of the work and the volunteer work that they've done. First, I'd like to acknowledge that your late mother's name was Juanita, and please name your father because he seems so much a part of this conversation.
Yeah. Benjamin Franklin Grant. He was a physician and surgeon in Gary, Indiana, and he was also in the Navy. He was commander in the Navy. And they were both self-made people. They actually came from backgrounds in which they had to gather identities that they wanted to emulate and recreate themselves and, created a society in which they were a part of and helped build the culture that we grew up in. So they were self-made. They were very extremely strong individuals, extremely strong ideals and ethics, and they would impart those things to us as children.
We can see that, and you are a credit to your family because when I think about it, they could have just gone on and just done their own thing, but what they did was they actually lent a hand to the Great Migration, and I can't even imagine what life would have been like for African Americans in Gary, Indiana back then, and the entire America. Courtney, our young friend, says, thank you so much for sharing your parents' story. It enriches us to know about that part of American social history. What I'd like to do is to have you parse a little bit out of the fact that there is actually a mission statement for this incredible foundation. And we'll get to see some photos of the things that you have mentioned, the activities. But how did you, number one, come up with this mission? And of course, you will then show us ways you've carried it out. And our community is such that if anybody would like to make comments at any point, just please feel free to just unmute and ask a question or say if something has affected you deeply like Courtney just did. Tell us how the mission came about for the Juanita C. Grant Foundation, please, Orlean.
This mission is basically our third mission statement. The founding board, we was extremely close knit. It's basically people that I had worked with, colleagues, my niece, who was in communications, my sister, who at that time was terminal, but she came aboard as a board member to help ground it. And we really researched for 2 years what we wanted to do. So we didn't have really a mission to start. We weren't sure. We wanted to, when we did create something, we wanted to make sure it was going to have an impact, that it was community based, that it met a need, and we could actually pinpoint what our impact was going to be and what the outcomes were. So it took us 2 years. And so this is the third iteration really of the mission. And how we came about it was throughout our journey in doing nonprofit work, in being on the ground, having focus groups, small meetings, town meetings, um, and workshops, one-on-ones, and spending a lot of time in the community, just getting to know the community and having them get to know us and building up trust and consistency and reliability that if we say something, we're going to be there, we're going to show up, we're going to be prepared, and we're going to follow through. And that we will write a report and we will share it with you as to what the findings are. So we wanted to have something that was going to be community based. It had to have a solution to it. It had to have something to do with improving the lives of older adults. And we wanted to strengthen it instead of the previous one said, and we would do training, build security, and it would be community focused. we wanted something that spanned more the lifetime of aging, something that was more of a continuum, more of some of the comments I heard earlier, where you have a sense of purpose about yourself. We wanted older adults not just have, position to go to or, a nice play, but really have a sense of purpose. Why do you get up in the morning? So we wanted to make sure our programs were giving them something to look forward to, some information they could take with them, something that would help give them some joy, some purpose in what they were doing. We wanted to give a safer community to older adults. So that was the elder abuse part. We wanted to not only educate older adults, but we also talked to government officials. We got the police departments involved. We got the state's attorney's office to come into the community. We got the Department of Justice, Elder Justice to bring resources. We got Consumer Financial Bureau, Protection Bureau to come into the community. And then we started getting phone calls from the Security Exchange Commission to come into the community. So we were bringing resources that had not been in there and spreading those around the 9 districts to create a safer community for everybody. And then the last part with possibilities as we age is really our expansion now into co-generation and intergenerational activities. And we recently renamed the Village Connector experience to Forward Together. And the reason why we did that is because we have 3 prongs to that. One is our outreach call program, which interrupts and helps older adults get reconnected and realign with their friends and family. We've added a mental wellness component to that, in which we conduct workshops on mental wellness and really help individuals look at how they're aging, what their wellness plan is, how to make a wellness plan, how to spread out their social connectedness so that there's various generations there that they're interacting with, and also to look within themselves as to what are the things that they look forward to on a daily basis, what would they like to do differently, and how to start moving in that direction. So we have kind of broadened our approach to aging and ageism. We're also looking at underserved communities and the uniqueness of those communities and how we need to tailor our approach to that. And even within economic strains. So we do a lot of research before we go into certain areas to make sure we know who we're talking to. We like to do a lot of logistical reviews to see what what are the economic backgrounds as far as jobs, activities, resources that are available, so that we can tailor our information to not only be realistic but also meeting a need. We don't want to just have a cookie cut presentation that we give out to everybody. We tailor make it to whoever group, whatever group or whatever organization we're going to be talking to.
I love it. What I'd like to do, because we have such an illustrious community with us this evening, open it up first for some questions and comments, because so much of your story will resonate because the community come with their own strengths and their own interests. So let me first stop speaking and ask if anybody would like to make a comment about the wonderful pearls of wisdom that Arlene has dropped, or if you have questions based on your own expertise and training. Please feel free to unmic.
Oh, yeah, I have a thought. Arlene, that was really what I was struck by is that you are taking it to a very personal level, a sort of a, this is a terrible word to use, but guerrilla warfare is like door to door. You're going door to door. You're meeting people, not just talking generally. But it also struck me that, and Lily, you'll remember this, when Mom was president of AARP, and I remember her having press conferences with who was the attorney general then? It was Do you remember that? And they were talking about the same thing about elder abuse, about being preyed upon financially, about financial abuse, and trying to get the word out so that people would be aware. But I think what you're doing by doing it very personally, by giving people an opportunity to reflect on their own lives with support, with guidance, with avenues that they can follow, I think is really transformative.
It's some of the interactions, can be very difficult when somebody's revealing something and some of their friends are there looking at them like, I never knew.
Mhm.
Um, it really does resonate with you that there's so much that needs to be done that to allow people to share where they've been, what they've been through, in a
Mhm.
space where there's resources for them, in a space where they felt comfortable and can trust you to do that. And it's we try to really establish rapport the minute individuals start walking in the door. So we have volunteers who um, who we educate to look for individuals, make sure they're comfortable, give them, if there's anything we can do to make them comfortable, we move tables, chairs, try to change the temperature if we can, change the blinds. We do whatever we can to make them feel like they're very special walking in the door, and if there's anything needed or that we can do. And then our approach is to be very personable. So we do a lot of storytelling. So I will share with them the elder abuse that my oldest sister endured from her adult children, which they threatened her um,
Mhm.
if she didn't write out a check.
Mhm.
And for one child, abandoned her for 3 days when she was bedridden. She didn't know where she was, and I had to fly up from Virginia to down to Georgia to see what was happening. So we share very personal stories that says, this has happened to me, and it opens up the door for somebody else to share what's happened to them. And I'm so glad you phrased it that way. That it's a more personal approach. I hadn't really coined it as that, but it is a very personal approach.
Mhm.
Oh, that was a beautiful observation, Deb. Thank you. That comes from your being a wonderful coach. And so I think there's a lot of synergies. I also wanted to note that Courtney had put in the chat that it was very much a model of grassroots organizing. And we now have joined here a friend who had introduced me to Courtney, Casey. She is a disability advocate. So thank you, Casey. You're so busy trying to do a PhD in disability rights and all that, disability studies. Maybe this is the best time to ask Orlean how you have seen the intersection of aging and disability and whether you have any comments on that. And if you don't mind, because you've actually taught me a lot about how to be sensitive to the African American culture and how it has influenced your work at the foundation. For example, I have been in a place where someone said, I have the sugar, meaning they have diabetes, but it was a colloquial that I had never heard before. So I'm asking a very complex question, but it's basically about aging, culture, and the intersection with aging and disability. Any insight?
Yeah, that's a fascinating subject. I do a lot of work on advocacy work on disability in Northern Virginia. Um, I'm the vice chair of the Coordinating Council of Adults and Aging and Disabilities, and I've been doing that for the last 5 years, which is work I really love. But the intersection and the intersectionality of age, race, and disabilities and trauma is what I call in there's a lot of um, publications that is the weathering of the body and the blame game. And
Mhm.
so a lot that you'll read in national journals and approaches, um, it's your fault that you have diabetes. It's your fault that you're obese. It's your fault your eating habits that um, you now have a lot of foot problems due to your uncontrolled diabetes, and this is what's going to be your next stage. And with the medical profession, there's a lot of insensitivity to pain in the Black community, especially for Black women. Pain, hurt
Yep.
are often negated or minimized as to the intensity and origin of it. And a fleeting pain, back pain, or whatever, it's just not always taken seriously. And I've experienced that. And so the intersection of it, what I see, is really the complexity of generations of how you grew up, where you live, your day-to-day environment. What kind of rhythm do you sustain? Where do you live? On an underpass? Do you live next to a busy, dangerous street? Do you have possibilities to have um, recreation areas? Do you have access to primary care? Do you have access to specialists? And we do know that healthcare and money go hand in hand. And if you have any types of restrictions on funding for medication, for food, for proper exercise, for living conditions that are not stressful, you have a much better chance of having a much healthier life. If you're living under extremely stressful environment, you're in survival mode all the time. You're in fight mode all the time. And your diet is rather precarious because you have minimal negotiation room as to what you may buy, what's available. If you have to take two buses to go to a grocery store that has fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, or you go to the corner store, which may not have it, but it's there. Or you live in a neighborhood, a district that has more liquor stores than it has grocery stores, more pawn shops than you have fresh markets, fresh food markets. So really have to look in the totality of where that individual resides, and years and years and years and years of deprivation. And so the weathering effect, and my brother and I talk about this all the time. He's an orthopedic surgeon. And we talk about individuals coming in at a much younger age, much older symptoms, much more advanced symptoms because of lack of primary care, diet, stress levels, survival mode, um, and inability to properly heal, properly seek treatments, or to have the medical community actually see them as a person, as a total person, versus I'm going to fix this widget and then you're gone. So that's part of what I see in the exacerbation of physical issues that result in having a disability. Um, I was interviewing some people today when I was talking during the workshop, and we always get into age, how old you are. And I was struck by the number of individuals there who were in their 60s. And I was guessing they were in their late 70s. And just talking with them about the type of life they've had, how many jobs they worked at the same time, how many people they were carrying as far as their family, and making sacrifices along the way. So you'll see more weathering in more underserved communities or marginalized communities because the access is not there in the environment is such that it compounds, stresses the body, so that asthma as a child is more serious than a child who has access to more ongoing specialists, allergists who specialize in that inhalation therapy, medication on a regular basis versus someone who's haphazard, lives in an environment where breathing the air around them is only going to exacerbate the asthma. So by the time you get to be adult, you are on your way to having respiratory issues.
Wow, that's so powerful because it's a term that I've only just started to learn more about, the social determinants of health, and
Mhm.
has such an impact on our lives. I'm going to forward to you the session that I did with Casey, because Casey Dougherty is now in the disability studies program for a PhD, and she herself has done artivism. Perhaps your community to learn more. If it's not an imposition, Casey, just a real quick overview of how artivism has been something that you've done through disability studies and whether the aging community might be able to learn from that model, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Sorry I joined late. I was in my stats class. Boring. So artivism is the it's actually like a combined word for art and activism. And if you go back into like disability history and also the history of other civil rights movements, art has really served as a form of protest. And specifically in the disability community, it can be a very accessible form of protest. And the research that I've done focuses on a disability community. It's a disability that I have called myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome. And people in the ME community have really, I think, taken to artivism because it can be done, from bed, for instance. And ME is a very energy limiting condition. So, like, I've spent many months bedbound and now I'm mostly housebound. And so, just thinking about how people are able to access the world and access forms of protest that maybe are not as common because generally when people think of protests, they think about marching, in the streets and that's very valid. But I think there's a important aspect of protest that is creative and thinking outside the box. And so I think too, while I've looked at it from kind of the energy limiting disability commission, like kind of condition, I think it can be really powerful for older folks too, and folks with, maybe mobility limitations or, maybe they're immunocompromised and they don't want to go out in a crowd of, hundreds of thousands. So I think it can be a really powerful tool for lots of different communities. And I've seen organizations and like small groups come together and have like, oh, maybe we'll do like a collage night. And that's something even like Lily, Courtney, and I have done together just for fun. So like I think it can be something you do on your own as like an active protest. And if you want to share it, if not, that's also fine. But also it can be, I think, a big community aspect. Sorry, that was kind of long.
Great. Thank you so much, because we're always looking for ideas. And this is maybe something that you could lead a session on for Orlean. Also, very kindly, Courtney has put in the chat more information about ME and how we've learned from you both, because you both have conditions that are what we are now learning is called invisible. I'd like to now turn to the concept of giving back and finding purpose, and how Marie has been a longtime volunteer leader. Marie, would you give us 3 words of why volunteerism is important to you and how you feel? And Orlean, if you could corroborate if you've heard that from the volunteers you've had with your foundation. Thank you both.
Wow. If I had to give 3 words, I think a real sense of humanity and acceptance of everyone as a precious human being. And I think one of the people who motivated me to get out there and do things was Viola Liuzzo.
Have you heard also from your volunteers, Orlean, how it gave them purpose?
I've been very fortunate to have volunteers who, some of them were seasoned volunteers. And so they've been in this mode of really enjoying, connecting, learning, helping. But I think when it comes to our Forward Together program of the structured outreach calls in which, you're calling an individual 1 to 3 times per week. That can go on for months in which you're really establishing a relationship with them. I think a lot of humility comes in. Um, it's humbling, I think, is one of the biggest words I hear, is when you're able to connect with someone or provide a service or the gift of yourself in what you share and actually have a reaction coming back from that individual that they're experiencing something new, they're experiencing something they didn't think was possible, they're connecting on a level that they didn't know was possible, or finding within themselves a light for them to move forward. So when the volunteers talk about, a particular individual who, they helped learn Zoom so they could reconnect with their estranged um, older, older child, and then their connection is back. They are just humbled by the fact that they were a part of that process. And I think, what I talk about and what we talk about in our training sessions with the volunteers is to see the humanity in individuals, to see beyond the surface, and to see the totality of this person and how complex and wonderful they are, and not see the tools of mobility, the signs of weathering. When you value the humanity of that individual, then I think that becomes very magical. But I would say humanity and humility are the two that I hear the most in people, and that really gives the volunteers a lot of purpose to be and continue what they're doing.
That is just beautifully expressed. I'm going to ask that each of us, if we have a glass near us, take a drink, because let that sit for a while. Humility, I think that's just beautiful. Thank you. We always have to stay hydrated for both. This has been hydration for my soul, because to see how you have taken a legacy of both parents. And I will send out to everyone the photo slideshow that we put together so you can meet Mrs. Grant, Juanita, and then see some of the activities of Orleans' amazing trajectory of making things possible for underserved, under-resourced community. Number one, what are some new plans ahead for the next 3 years, if you could identify anything? And then a last question would be, what have you learned about yourself? Like, my goodness, that young girl growing up in Gary, Indiana, looking back, what have you learned from all this experience of starting a foundation? So some bullet points of what you'd like to accomplish in the next 3 years, please.
I think in the next 3 years, where we're moving towards is really connecting generations, and connecting generations in such a way that there's an appreciation in both directions. There's a mutual admiration for the skill sets, the energy, the wisdom, the lived experience, the patience that generations can share with one another, and need to stay vibrant, and also to have a sense of the future as well as the present. You hear a lot about living in the moment. You also have to have a sense of where you're going, future as well, possibilities. Love that, starting a triathlon, art, activism is wonderful. The other is really to create more of a higher level of awareness between law enforcement and the community on elder abuse and fraud, and the synergy that needs to be between the two. They need each other. You can't do one without the other. You can't litigate away elder abuse and fraud. It's too rapid. But you can make a safer community if both those bookends are together and work together. There's a lot of strength there. And to have more community champions take that forward beyond, the level that we can, take it into their churches, into their hair salon, the barbershop, their community civic association, to have that permeate more in the community, those two things. The what have I learned about my nonprofit experience? It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I thought creating a for-profit was hard, but a nonprofit was totally uncharted territory. So I really had to dig deep, and I really had to sit back and listen. One of the first things I did was seek out individuals who could help me. And I was directed to the Washington Jewish Center to talk to some nonprofit leaders there. And they were so gracious in allowing me to come, did not know me. And the first thing they said was, for the first 3 years, do one thing well, and then add another, and then add another. That was very hard because I'd like to have like many, many, many plates going at the same time. But I really had to sit back and listen, be patient, and understand that this was not going to be just me leading this. But I had to create a desire and a need for a group of individuals to work with me on an unknown, uncharted territory. And that was humbling in itself. And it also allowed me the chance to practice things I would never have an opportunity to practice, such as creating programs in a community, going and speaking to the county executive about a gap I saw in the community. It removed all sense of hesitancy as far as public speaking, approaching people, fundraising. I had no hesitancy. There's no shame in any of that. I just go out and do it because I really believe passionately in what the foundation can do. And I think that passion came from my mother and my father, and that they were both dedicated to what they did, despite despite having to raise a family and live in a community. They were very passionate about civil rights, religion, community involvement. And so it's I've grown tremendously. I wasn't growing that way in the for-profit world. It's more like make the money. This is more what can I do, which is much more powerful for me and gives me a reason to get up and move forward.
So beautifully said. You are truly what is the term that's often used, but now truly an embodiment, a servant leader. This has been such an inspiration. Why don't we gift before we end, Orlean, with a word cloud? I'll say either a noun, an adjective, or a verb that's come to mind because of her inspiration tonight. And then I'll call upon the next person. If you could repeat that and call upon the next person. For me, I would say, Orlean, my word is powerful. Thank you. Powerful. I'll pass the baton off to Marie, please.
Okay. So I repeat your word and add one. Am I correct? Okay.
Yes.
Powerful yet vulnerable.
Nice. Please call upon the next person you'd like to add to that.
Deb.
We'll have to ask you to unmute again.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Powerful, vulnerable, transformative.
That's good.
Or transformational.
Nice, nice. And you don't have to remember all the words because I think by the seventh one, I'm going to
hard.
I'm also putting them in the chat too, so no one has to come up with them on the spot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.
Please call upon the next person.
Oh, Barbara.
Wow. I'm glad you got me early. Powerful, vulnerable. Oh, the one we just heard. This is what they do for Medicare now when you go in and get your physical. Powerful, vulnerable. I'm gonna
Transformative.
say, I'm gonna say passionate.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good one.
there is almost nothing worth doing for which you don't have some passion. Passion is something that I can feel through this Zoom meeting coming from you. And I believe that passion will drive you for a very, very, very long time. And let me just add one more thing. I think the passion of your mother and your father, I can feel it as well. It's palpable.
Mhm.
Beautifully said, Dr. Diggs Brown. Would you like to call upon the next person for the next part of our word cloud?
Oh, absolutely. Denise?
Okay. Good evening. Oh, what a beautiful organization. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
And my word would be heartfelt because as you're speaking, I just felt your heart in terms of the work that you're doing and that you put your heart into what you're doing and generating. So that's my word for you, heartfelt.
Beautiful. And because you're on your iPhone, you may not be able to see everyone. So I'll pass the baton on to Courtney, please.
My word is interconnected because Orlean, you're ensuring that everyone who encounters your work is connected to your parents' legacy, and you're moving that forward and you're sharing their story with us. And so that's really powerful. And also the way that you're organizing community is bringing people together. And Lily, I'll also say that's what you're doing on this call, especially at the beginning when you were encouraging us all to find connections and facilitating that conversation by pointing out ways that we had common interests. I think it's really beautiful that we're able to be a part of that today. And Casey, I'll pass over to you next.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, I can't decide between two, so I'll do both. Um, my first one is care, and then my second one is community.
Nice. Nice. Well, we have gifted you because you have gifted us, Orlean. We think about your late father. We think especially about your late mother and how they must be so proud of what you have done in their name. Thank you so much for your time this evening. And thank you to the community for joining us. Any last words for us, Orlean, as you take leave tonight?
Well, yeah, this has just been a joy and a pleasure. It has been a joy and a pleasure to meet Lily and get to know her. And she immediately just, I told somebody, I said, you sometimes you meet people and they're just amazing. I just met her and I've just been in touch with her, and she has been so supportive and really helped move me forward in my thinking and possibilities of what could be accomplished and accomplished together. You are an amazing group of women and individuals, and you're on the right. You're inspirational, and I hope we can, connect in many ways. And I've learned a lot from everybody here, and this this is part of why I love nonprofit work. You meet the most amazing people doing the most amazing things in different walks of life. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.